For people unfamiliar with you, please tell us your name, what your background is, and what you've been doing for the last 40 years.
I'm Brian Clement, the director of Hippocrates Health Institute, and almost 50 years ago I began my professional life. I, as a young American, found myself out of shape, out of touch, and in trouble, and completely made a turn in the right direction and adapted a plant-based diet, began to exercise, and work intensely on my attitude. I think that that's always the most important. And was led by my mentor to do work in the natural health field. And slowly but surely recognized that there was a great need for people not only here in our country, but globally to be educated about this. That somehow, over a short period of time, over 4 or 5 generations, we drifted from an organic lifestyle, a community-based farming lifestyle, to a haphazard, high-speed, insane life, where everyone's eating fast food and families don't sit at a table and communicate anymore. Now we're on cell phones. We're driving with cell phones as if we're in our living room. And our work schedules have gone up 20, 25 hours. And with all of that insanity, people are sicker than they've ever been. So I felt it very appropriate that I educate myself in that area. So I started with nutrition, had education as a naturopathic doctor, became a PhD nutritionist, and I have a team of doctors and nurses that have worked for me at Hippocrates for several decades.
Are you familiar with any of these studies? And if so, can you tell us what they concluded? Number one, the more recent meta-analysis of all the best studies that showed a 31% increase in mortality of people who ate a ketogenic diet. Number two, Gary Frazier's Adventist health studies. Number three, regards studies showing the African American diet is deadly. And four, Walter Willett Nurse's health study and the health professional follow-up study.
Yes, we'll start with Dr. Williams, who is president of the Cardiovascular Association here in America. And I believe the number was 27% higher mortality rate when it came to people who are on this very high animal fat diet. Sadly, people get mono-focused on one area of health, and they looked at the brain. And they looked at all of the brain disorders, including Alzheimer's disease, and rightfully concluded that literally the brain is made of fat, and by putting some form of fat in there, it slowed the progression of these diseases. Sadly, they chose the wrong source of fat. The work that we've been doing at Hippocrates since 1956 actually brings essential fats into that picture, and our mortality rates go down when people are preventing brain disorder, not go up. Number two, you're talking about the Adventist study. And this is a study where it looked at one of the 5 groups that are part of the blue zones. Now there's 6 recently. And the journalists that did that research, not a doctor or researcher, wisely said, look, one person is saying the ketogenic diet, one is saying a living food diet, one is saying macrobiotic, one is saying Atkins. Well, let's go out and see who lives the longest. And lo and behold, found 5 and now 6 groups, and one was in Loma Linda, California. So that's where that study was conducted, and showed on a fairly poor plant-based diet, people lived much, much longer than they did on the average Western diet that all of us are killing ourselves with. The next study is a nursing study that's a very long-term study. It's one of the rare jewels we have in the research community. And they looked for decades at nurses and the way they lived. And they found, for instance, sugar. If they ate more than the average, which is unbelievable to begin with, 8 tablespoons a day for the average person, just a little bit more, they doubled their heart attacks and strokes. Cancer rates went up, not only from the sugar, from animal food consumption. And they also looked for the first time in a global sense, a universal sense, at the stress factors, which I was appreciative of. Now, we've come a long way since those nursing studies, and there's been a lot more added, certainly in the international community. These are the ones in English, so of course here we always talk about those. But to me, much more acutely interesting are some from Europe.
Some people say beans and grains didn't exist until 10,000 years ago, and therefore are not our natural foods, and our bodies aren't programmed to eat them. And Therefore, we are meant to eat animal products. What does the best science say?
Well, the best science says that anthropology is wrong. Here at the conferences here, one of the subjects I'll be speaking about is a real history of how we ate. And looking at the real science that came out today, not what they're teaching at Oxford and Harvard and Stanford, but the real science. Scientists who basically looked at really our teeth. I was stunned recently to find out that all of these people who have stuck to the status quo and taught PhD students for, it seems, eternity that we were hunters and gatherers, never bothered to see the indentations in the teeth. So Dr. Richards basically has done so. And he points out that throughout history, pre-Homo sapien, you and I are Homo sapiens, we've been around in this form for about 10,000 years or so. We started in a valley in Ethiopia. Our ancestors were black, not brown. And we then started to move globally. Then you had Neanderthals, and we used to think that we never mixed with them, but recent studies show that we have 3 or 4% of our genetics as Neanderthals. And there were a few other groups, Erectus, etc. But who won is our group. Now, we're not sure how that happened. There's 2 major schools of thought. One school is that we beat them up and killed them and got rid of them. The other is that we outsmarted them. And we used to also think that Neanderthals, as a matter of fact, it has a stereotypical view of cavemen without any intelligence, had bigger brains than you and I. So possibly they didn't have the same gifts we had for survival. So he looked, Richards, at the teeth and found out we were plant eaters. And we ate pretty much vegetables, green leafy vegetables, and fruit. These were our 2 foods. And then he brought geologists in wisely, which was pretty sharp as far as I'm concerned, and said, how come the indentations for this 5 or 10 or 15-year period are deeper? They're engraved in a different way. And the geologist said, that's when we had droughts. So to say we never ate seeds is completely wrong, and bean is just a seed. So we did eat seeds, and when we ate seeds, it wasn't our first choice. It was our second choice when that's what was available. But did they find that we ate meat and ate the bones? No, they did not. Did they also find we had claws to rip into the flesh and to gnaw it off a creature? Or did they think that we were as ignorant as we seemingly are today to get under the cow and drink from its bosom? That's perverted. I know it's considered mainstream and normal today, but if I suggest to any of you that like to take dairy food, be it whipped cream, be it organic, be it cheese, be it kefir, none of you would pretty much do that. And if you did, probably you'd be arrested for that act.
Are hemp, flax, and olive oil good for us to eat? Should we try to include these oils in our diet, or should we try to avoid them?
There's a major school of plant-based doctors, we're called lifestyle doctors, although Hippocrates founded lifestyle medicine. There was no such thing as lifestyle medicine until our doors opened in Boston back in the 1950s. And our founder recognized something, that it wasn't just about diet, it was about your entire lifestyle. And she also recognized something, sadly, even the alternative and holistic doctors don't understand today. We don't want you, the patient, to be dependent upon us. We want to educate you so you don't have any dependence on us or anyone else. So we have to teach lifestyle. The lifestyle, sadly, your mom and dad didn't teach you. Your education didn't teach you. Healthcare didn't teach you. And so that's what lifestyle medicine is. But these docs, pretty much, they don't get this big picture. They say when they are monofocused on a cardiovascular disease, which, by the way, I think is true, avoid all oils. But how about when we look at the real work on oils and the people who have least dementia and the people who basically are very congruent when they're 100 years old? There are people who have a lot of fat in their brain. And yes, our body produces an awful lot of that on a healthy plant-based diet. If we're exercising, it also encourages it to go through the blood-brain barrier and create that structural brain fat that we need. But on the other hand, they also find that over 90% of people 100 who are completely awake and lucid have high fats. And so I do encourage, if not around the time, or you've previously have or recently had a heart attack or stroke, that little bits of oil are healthy for you. Now, if you're on the Hippocrates diet, you really don't have to add oil. And the reason being is we have the highest protein diet, the highest essential fat diet, the highest vitamin diet, the highest mineral diet, the highest phytochemical diet on the planet Earth. And so I'm not one that says nobody should eat oils. And by the way, it would make a lot of people's lives really boring.